Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm recording here from the Temple of Silence in Luoma, Finland, near Helsinki. It's been a few days since I've been able to, goodness, news feeds. It's been a few days since I've been able to do these recordings, but I persist as best I can, and we are in that long and very voluminous rule number 10 in the Treatise on White Magic. And we're on page 281, and we are beginning a new section which relates to the centers, the energies, and the rays. All of this requires very careful and repeated study if we really want to know what we're doing and what we're supposed to absorb. The day will come when the magical formulas will be given to us, and as DK says, if we do our study properly, we'll be in a good position at that time to benefit from the more practical occult knowledge which he will impart. So let us begin our work. I always want to get my, there it is. And basically, you know what we're doing, obviously. This is a study group. We are reading through the book, and all these books, as many as I can work with, um, line by line, word by word, with the hope of having the material which Master DK has given really sink in to our understanding. It is not easy material. Many people prefer more personal material that seems to speak to them in a personal way. But the teaching of Master DK has been sanctioned by the hierarchy, by his master, Kutumi, by the Christ, even by Sanat Kumara. It's been, so to speak, released to be given, within reason, of course, guarding the secrets that must be guarded. And we would be foolish, would we not, if we did not take advantage of this tremendous bestowal upon the consciousness of humanity. There are two connections in which Rule 10 can be studied, and thereby results of practical value can be achieved. Let us never forget that this, compared to a treatise on cosmic fire, is in a way a very practical book. It has a lot of seventh ray in it, and it's all about ultimately, the control of the astral body. And who among us does not need to control that vehicle and fill it with the energy of love? We can study it from the standpoint of the work which the soul does in relation to its instrument, the human being, and we can also study it from the standpoint of organization work and of that form building which the disciple does in relation to his service for the hierarchy. So certainly we have to deal with the issue of how these rules, this knowledge, will affect our instrument, the personality, considering us to be both the soul in incarnation and even the soul on its own plane in a certain respect. And then, of course, there's the work in the world by means of which we serve the creative hierarchy. Back of the outer form of a human being, responsible for its creation, its maintenance, and its use, lies, we know, the soul. And let us consider this to be the solar angel, angel of the presence. A great being relative to us who was once a human being in a previous solar system. And one day we will be of the status of such a being as the solar angel. Back of all activity for the furthering of human evolution as well as of other evolutionary processes stands the hierarchy. Uh, the hierarchy is like the soul of humanity. Oh, see, I wonder. No, I don't have that. Both represent the centers of energy. Both work under law creatively. Both proceed from subjective activity to objective manifestation, and both are responsive in the great sequence of graded lives to vitalization and stimulation from higher centers of energy. Even the hierarchy is stimulated from above, uh, and so is that being we call the soul, a very difficult uh, protean word used in many different contexts. We just need to know the particular context in which it is being used, that term soul, whether it's the soul in incarnation, whether it's the soul on its own plane, whether it's an aspect of the solar angel that we call the angel of the presence, whether it is the solar angel itself or some still larger aspect of consciousness. There's a lot of difficulty dealing with the word soul, and people get confused. I remember when I was first reading this book long ago, I was always confused. Are we talking about the human being or are we talking about a higher being here? And I hope I've straightened it out for myself to a certain extent anyway. So, yes, back of human evolution is the hierarchy, and back of the evolution of the uh, individual human being is the soul or solar angel or angel of the presence. Um, the entirety of the solar angel, its full energy component, cannot be incarnated on the higher mental plane. It is a being much greater than that, which is already apparently journeyed via the cosmic astral plane to the star Sirius for education. So it is not possible to, but it is possible to include a fragment of itself, so to speak, within the human being and a projection of itself within that vehicle upon the higher mental plane, which we call the egoic lotus or causal body. Some of the factors that the disciple has to learn to recognize as his particular series of lives unfolds fall into two main groups, each of them bringing his form aspect under 7 types of energy or influences, and of course, we do recognize here. I see, recognize the 7 rays. Okay, at least those 7. There are a number of septonates, but they are all ultimately controlled by an ultimate universal septonate, which we might call, I don't know, 7 universal rays. They are certainly greater beings and emanations than what we call the 7 rays from our local constellation the Great Bear. There is first the group of forces which concerns purely the form side. I'm remembering now these 49s, 49 having to do with form, 49 having to do with soul or consciousness, and 49 having to do with spirit. The spirits of darkness, I think they're called, because, of course, in a way, spirit is so inaccessible, even though so obvious to those who can somehow register it. So there is first the group of forces which concerns purely the form side, that are the work of the outer builders, and which are the predominant factors right up to the stage of the probationary path. On, whoopsie, this is always the case, isn't it? Okay, so on this path of probation, we begin to concern ourselves with the truly subjective factor. These are the forces inherent in matter itself. They deal with the body nature and might be listed as follows. Okay, the outer builders are responsible for these forces. Let's just get that established. The outer builders are responsible for these forces. So there are physical forces. These are due to the life of the cells which constitute the body. This cell life is responsive to the cell life of the environment. Never let it be forgotten that the occultist always sees the correlation between the factors in himself and the corresponding factors in his surroundings, and I think we should note that. The great law of analogy, or the more related but more definite law, or more detailed law of correspondences, is operating in the life of the occultist. We live in a world of forms, at least on the cosmic physical plane we do, and in a way the whole universe is a form, and I'm talking about the subjective aspects of it as well. We live in a world of forms. These forms are made up of lives, and these lives have their own emanatory and contributory influence. They fall in their turn into three main groups. So he's getting quite detailed here regarding the physical forces. Three main groups. Okay, A, those emanations which, issuing from the cells themselves and dependent upon their quality, produce a good or bad effect, are coarsening or refining in their influence, and raise or lower the physical vibration of the united cell body. Okay, so let's just call these, cell emanations. Thus, as we know, the physical effect of a coarse, brutal, animal-natured man will be different from that of the refined, beautifying results of contact with an older soul, functioning in a body, cultured, clean, disciplined, and purified. And let us say here we are reminded of the great range of development of the human being. Okay, now, so this is cell emanation. Okay. Okay, emanatory and contributing influences. These forms are made up of lives, and these lives have their own emanatory contributing influence, where that's what we're studying at the moment. A little bit on the medical side here. Those emanations of a purely physical kind which are responsible for that chemical affinity between one animal body and another, which produces the coming together of the sexes. Now, maybe, I don't know, could we call this, in a way, animal magnetism? It is an aspect. Oh, I guess all of this comes from having read the book quite a bit before. I'm not looking ahead. But those who wonder how these things happen would say, well, something in the perceptual mechanism looks ahead and then cognizes it and then anticipates it. It is an aspect of animal magnetism and is the response of the cells to the call of other cells acting under the law of attraction and repulsion. Sometimes it's simply called the law of attraction, but I think that maybe a more complete name is attraction and repulsion. It is shared by man with the animals and is instinctive and is free from all mental reactions. So one might attribute his or her attraction to another, to this type of emanation, about which there is rarely any real knowledge. All right, the chemical affinity. I simply have to somehow note these. I want to take them in. You know, there are many forces with which we are dealing, and most of them beyond our range of understanding. We don't take them into consideration usually. Excuse me. Then, those forces or emanations which are the response of the cells to harmonious rhythms and therefore dependent upon the cell having in itself something of that to which it responds. I get these news feeds. I hope they don't, I don't know, they might just pop out with a bell. I'm sorry about that. I really don't know what to do about it just yet. Okay, so I'll repeat that. Those forces or emanations, which are the response of the cells to harmonious rhythms. Okay, and therefore dependent upon the cell having in itself something of that to which it responds. I suppose if we're just to think about this, this requires the refinement of the cell. These emanations are little understood as yet, but will increasingly come to the fore as the race progresses. This type of force is that mysterious something which enables the physical body to recognize as harmonious or congenial a physical surrounding or environment. For instance, a subtle something, and DK calls it mysterious. Okay, so it's a response, let's just say, we'll call it this, a response to harmony or dissonance in the environment. It is that undefinable reaction which results in two human beings, apart from all sex attraction, where people of the same sex experience it with each other. And I hear he's assuming that there is not sex attraction between people of the same sex, or at least should not be. It is that undefinable reaction which results in two human beings, apart from all sex attraction, for people of the same sex experience it with each other, having a harmonious effect physically upon each other. Good to be with you, so relaxing, uh, so affirming, all that kind of thing. I mean, there are people in whose presence we desire to be. Let's see if I can get this straight. Um, because of just how it feels. And others in the presence of whom perhaps we are on edge or uncomfortable somehow. And that's possible. Okay. This is, on the outer plane, the esoteric basis for all group relation. And it is the understanding of these emanations that enables the isolation and segregation of races to be carried forward under the great evolutionary plan. And, we have the colloquial, we've all heard it, birds of a feather flock together. So this is it's a kind of a apportionment of types, a kind of segregation of types. Okay, let's see if I can get this. Yeah, that's it. And it's interesting because there have to be types according to the way qualities are arranged and divided from each other. There must be formal types which reflect those qualities, and each of those qualities and combinations of qualities will have in the mind of whatever greater creator there is some particular function. So the idea of segregation for development is important. Otherwise, you have just some sort of mixture of types, and the true quality may not have a chance to be built or to emerge, and therefore will fail in expressing its particular function within a whole. So, we have nations segregated by types, ray types. We have perhaps races segregated that way. There's a lot of typing or qualification or qualitization going on in creation. And we have to find the reason behind this apparent segregation, leading later to the appropriate unity of interaction. So anyway, these three might be described as the quality of the cell forces operating entirely on the physical plane, which produce a peculiar type of physical body, the magnetic attraction between two physical body, and the racial types. All right, well, there he sums it up very well. Excuse me. So I will read that again. These three might be described as the quality of the cell forces. Interesting to think that there are different qualities which distinguish the cells of one individual from another. I guess as we get more into the micro study of the cell, this may emerge. The reason for it may emerge, but it's probably all directed from higher levels which at present are not being studied. These three might be described as the quality of the cell forces operating entirely on the physical plane, which produce a peculiar type of physical body in terms of its range of refinement, let us say, and maybe, its general ray type. The magnetic attraction between two physical bodies, mostly unconscious, he tells us, and the racial types. which do have to be properly differentiated. Let's call it that way. The word segregation has such a bad connotation now, but we're talking about the differentiation for development of the various racial types. In the secret doctrine, this is somewhat dealt with. These three factors guide the Manu of the race as he builds a new race and impresses the outer builders with his ideas. Interesting that the first ray department is really responsible for building the concrete vehicle in which all of the principles, including the spiritual principles, are contained. And a master takes this into consideration as well, apparently. They also guide a master of the wisdom as he builds his physical body at will for the carrying forward of his work at any time or place. And this is, so these three, oh goodness, these three types of emanations guide building of the MVP, the Mayava Rupa. Interesting. These emanations should, in measure, be understood somewhat by all those engaged in forming organizations and groups for active service in the world. Are we throwing together, as DK has once said, those who do not suit each other at all? And he kind of, the second and fourth ray type have a really good idea of how this worked, maybe the seventh ray type too, but sometimes he seems to accuse the third ray type of a type of selection which is inappropriate. Of course, it can also later be very appropriate, but throwing together those who really don't belong. And does he tell us about what makes a good host or hostess? Knowing whom to seat near whom at the table. Okay. So, what should the disciple ask himself? What should the disciple ask himself should be the vibratory quality of the cells of that body, of the individuals who compose it. You cannot throw together the crude with the refined unless for particular distinct purposes. So, what should the disciple ask himself? Should the vibratory quality of the cells of that body should be the vibratory quality of the cells of that body of the individuals who compose it? What should be the quality of its attractive force and of the magnetic effect it is to have in the world? So this is the more astral component, but as it affects the cells. What does the group possess through the medium of its corporate units, which will put it en rapport with other groups, and so make it harmonious in its relations with them? So many groups are separative. What of it, a group's potentials for harmony with other groups? So these questions warrant careful attention and should be considered by all group builders. Well, you see, these are largely physical forces. Even when I said the word astral, that's the sort of the qualitative area in our body or in our personality that has the attractive and repulsive factor operating strongly. But even on the strictly physical level, that does operate attraction and repulsion. And Probably behind it all, it's mathematical. And one day we will know the exact frequencies that control the way these emanations work. What makes what frequencies make a crude or a refined cell? What frequencies in combination attract or repel? What frequencies tell us that there is harmony to be achieved in a particular environment rather than dissonance? It's all very micro in a certain way. And I think for us, we simply have to be aware that such effects are in operation. These things are happening. And whether we know it or not, and mostly we don't know it, we just know the result. So, all of this again, we're talking about physical forces and their qualities and their relations to other physical forces and to the environment in general. And we're talking about all let's see, all of that discussed below is emanations. And the whole study of emanations was undertaken, by the Buddhist scholars, and I think by the Gnostics, and I find that without a study of emanation, a real understanding of universal process is not possible, at least an accurate understanding, at least in my view. I find the study of emanation to be uh, indispensable. Shall we say, how does a candle light other candles and still remain itself? We might say that this is a symbol of the process, a going forth while remaining. Um, a prodigal son goes forth, but another aspect of the monad remains at home. How is that possible? So we attempt to divine how that may be the case. Vital forces. Now we're into the vital body. These are often regarded by the materialists as intangible and therefore not material at all. But remember, of course, it's all part of the physical systemic plane. Vital forces are, in fact, physical, at least to the occultist. But the occultist regards the etheric medium as a form or aspect of matter and as relatively tangible uh, as the outer objective form. And now we enter the subject of what we might call substantiality. Substantiality. Um, Matter of a more refined kind can be substantial to matter of a more gross kind. Finally, there is only one substanding something in all of cosmos, and even when cosmos does not exist. Okay, but the occultist regards the etheric medium as a form or aspect of matter and as relatively tangible as the outer objective form. To him, the ether of space, which term necessarily includes the etheric form of all bodies, the astral or emotional sentient body, and the mental body, constituted of mind stuff, are all of them material and are all subject and are the substance of the form side of life. Now, this is so important. I hope I hope that save worked. Okay, so I'm going to include here something which is usually beyond the designation of the ethers of space. So this is let's call this an enlargement of the meaning of the ethers of space. Okay, so in other words, we're talking about the waters of space, the ethers of space. We've been talking about that even before, and we've recognized that this term ether is fairly inclusive and does not simply mean the refined part of the dense uh, systemic plane. So let's really take that in, and in order to do that, I think I always want to enlarge upon this. To him, the ether of space, which term necessarily includes the etheric form of all bodies, the astral or emotional sentient body, and the mental body, constituted of mind stuff, are all of them material and are substance, the substance of the form side of life. See, all of these are substantial to the dense physical form. And as we progress, substantial to each other. The astral matter is substantial to the physical etheric matter, the mental matter is substantial to the astral, and the higher mental to the lower mental, and on it goes in this ladder of substantiality. And maybe that's a term worth a ladder of substantiality. As the basis of correct understanding, it should be noted that the cell life to which we have above referred is coordinated, influenced, and vitalized by the bloodstream. That intricate system which interpenetrates every part of the body is responsible for its welfare and demonstrates in a manner not yet truly comprehended the fact that the blood is the life, and this is enlarged upon in esoteric healing. There are essences involved here. The heart is involved, a certain essence being carried. The blood is an aspect of energy, as is the sap of the vegetable kingdom. And let's just say here we have an important analogy. Uh, so, all of this, all of the cell life and its emanations to which we have referred is coordinated, influenced, and vitalized by the bloodstream. Okay. I try to, under a kind of adaptation of the law of fixation, to fix these statements in my mind so that they will be there when they need to be more deeply understood and correlated with others of his statements until, under the influence of pure reason, we begin to see the whole picture. And of course, in a way, the bloodstream is underlay by the system of nadis, and there have to be very intricate systems in all of the substanding vehicles. I suppose here we're looking at a little gesture towards the future of medicine, and in esoteric healing we certainly have that strongly developed, but of course it was written quite a few years after this. The sympathetic nervous system. See, here's a man who has studied the whole thing from the inside out, really. The sympathetic nervous system, that marvelous apparatus of sensation, is closely related to the emotional or astral body. The contact is made via the solar plexus, just as the vitality governing the quality of the bloodstream makes its contact via the heart. Okay. In the heart is the center of physical plane existence. Now that's an amazing statement, very simply put, but without it, there would be no physical plane existence. It's the vitalizing center of physical plane existence, and without that heartbeat, um, the inner vehicles, the inner aspects will ascend and remove themselves from the voluntary confinement that they have undertaken in the external form. The cerebrospinal system works in close relation to the chitta, or mind stuff. Okay, so here we have a good tabulation of the different systems and the glands or centers associated with them. Regarding the cell life, the bloodstream is the center of its existence, and the heart center is the animator uh, of the heart, of course. And the gland associated is the thymus gland, interestingly more highly developed in children than in adults, unless the adult has undertaken spiritual training. Regarding sensory life, we have the sympathetic nervous system. He's differentiating these, of course, the sympathetic from the cerebrospinal system. The sensory life, the sympathetic nervous system, the chakra involved is the solar plexus, and the gland is the pancreas. Now you kind of wonder, when there are diseases of the various glands, such as pancreatic cancer, quite a deadly and rapidly moving disease, what is malfunctioning here with regard to the sympathetic nervous system and the solar plexus center? As for the mental life, I wish I could, maybe I can do something here which will make them a little smaller. Possibly, possibly a little smaller. And then, get them to line up. Maybe I can do that. Okay. Solar plexus, thymus, pancreas, cerebrospinal adjunct, pituitary, and the vital life, 7 centers, and the spleen. Okay. So, regarding the mental life, it's the cerebrospinal system, the system which includes the will, volition. Interesting that the ajna center should be the controlling factor, not just the creative throat center, but the directing ajna center. And the pituitary body is involved. And as regards the vital life as a whole, it's all 7 centers and the spleen. And well, I'm surprised here. What about let's say, the splenic center, and the spleen? Anyway, for some reason, we don't, maybe the way it's copied, I'm not sure. But let's just see here. If it can be the gland called the spleen. Okay. So the important systems in the personality of man, the cell life, that is the physical body, the astral sensitive body, the mental vehicle, we have here different factors within the physical body which are related to them and different centers which are related to these factors. This, as you see, governs the manifestation of the quaternary. But there are other aspects of humanity which manifest through the objective form and which complete the entire man and make the seven of his manifold objective existence. We have to remember, because we are in the fourth round, um, forms tend to appear uh, in groups of four. And he deals with that at some point. But now we're going to deal with higher aspects of the man. And I think this is very interesting. Let's just look here and try to become aware of these different systems, how they work, what they rule, what are their associations. Okay, so we go on and we deal with self-consciousness. The upper brain, the head center is involved, and the pineal gland. I guess we call this soul consciousness, and the beginning of soul consciousness has to do simply with being self-aware. Then there's self-expression, having to do with the lower brain. Interesting, the throat center is involved, and the gland is the thyroid gland. With this we are familiar. Number 7, self-perpetuation, the sex organs. I guess every form somehow seeks to perpetuate itself. It seems to be built in. The sacral center is involved in the reproductive organs, and then this will factor. It's called self-assertion here. It's involving the entire man, and that semi-latent center at the base of the spine is involved. It does keep us in incarnation, of course, but its true development does not come later, and the assertion of the will can go through many stages, including the assertion of a higher type of will. And the adrenal glands atop the kidneys are involved as representatives in the glandular world of the center at the base of the spine, which is interesting, a little higher in a way than the sacral center. There's a reversal. The organs of the representing the sacral center are below that center. The organ representing the center of the base of the spine are above that center. And that crossing has got to be significant. Okay, so 8 factors are here enumerated. You will notice that 8 factors are here enumerated, and it is here that many schools, I suppose, various schools of spirituality and occultism go astray. The heading Vital Life is a comprehensive one, but it must be remembered that it relates entirely to the physical vitalization of man through the lowest aspect of the centers. Now, hint, the chakras, as any worlds, have lower and higher aspects. So it's the lowest aspect of the centers that are responsible here for the physical vitalization. And I think, all centers are at least threefold, and one moves toward the jewel. And I don't know, maybe you can look at this as a flower. I was just looking at a sunflower in the garden. There's that whole stalk, and there's the support, and then there's the petals, and then there's the seeds. There's always a kind of a threefoldness in these plant structures. This vital life of the universe of matter enters into the human organism through the spleen. And I suppose this is more solar prana than it is the planetary prana, which is involved with the pores. I'm no expert in these matters, but I seem to remember that that is the case, and there's a difference in how they are processed. So we've had some very technical information here, and the assignment of the different factors within the body to different functions and psychological states, and in correlation with different chakras, the cell life, the sensory life, the mental life, the vital life as a whole. It's interesting that it should be considered the fourth in a way. It keeps everything going. And then we seem to go into more psychological factors related to consciousness and its expression, self-conscious or consciousness, self-expression, then self-perpetuation, which seems a lesser, not so much a conscious function, but a very instinctual function, and self-assertion, which becomes more and more willful and less instinctual. And we can see here the different glands that are involved. So this in itself, well, it requires a lot of study, clearly. But at least the tabulation is here, and to it we can refer. So this vital life of the universe of matter enters into the human organism through the spleen, and of course the splenic center is involved with its 6 petals. Now, the centers have 3 main functions. First, to vitalize the physical body, so that's maybe the lowest, can it be? The lowest aspect of the centers. Second, to bring about the development of self-consciousness in man. So this correlates to the petals of the centers. And third, to transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire man into a state of spiritual being. You know, all the centers coordinate with each other, and all the, let's just say the jewels, what can we call them? Jewels align and coordinate. So every center has its jewel will-related aspect at the very center of the center. And, you know, this tells us also about the 3 phases of development through which all of us pass. We will pass through a strictly physical, personal stage. We will pass through a stage in which the enhancement of consciousness is the major factor. And then finally, a stage in which we understand the nature of will and how it relates to being. Let's call that the 3rd stage, although in a way being is distinct from either will, love consciousness, or the outer type of expression in intelligence. Well, if one were loaded with the 5th ray, it would be very helpful, wouldn't it? The vitality aspect is shared by man with the animals and with all created forms, and let's just say even forms of the mineral kingdom, so it seems. And his capacity to move freely in a 3-dimensional world is the outstanding aspect, achievement of that aspect. So this movement is related to the 3rd ray, which, as we learn, I think it's page 507 or 506 of the rays initiation, which moves from here to there. Okay. The self consciousness aspect is the prerogative of the human family, not of the lower kingdoms. And when man has evolved, when all parts of his nervous system, his endocrine system, and his centers are coordinated and working in harmonious rhythm, then the highest aspect, the spiritual, makes its presence felt. Well, that's what we're working on now, aren't we? This is our, this is the focus of students of spirituality. The spiritual energy, and not just the consciousness or sentient energy, pours through man, the instrument of divine life and the custodian of forces, to be held and used for the other and lower kingdoms in nature. So here we have, we might say, this is the true function of the human kingdom. The subplane. Oh, no, that's it. The spiritual energy, that's it. Okay, sometimes the tendency to use codes rewrites the original text. So this is the true function of the human kingdom, and we have to say in relation to lower kingdoms. And so we must become master of all these apparatus with which we are endowed. And not yet are we that. We're not yet the knowing masters of all of these systems within us, which when correlated make us a true arhat, or, eventually master of the wisdom. Some very factual fifth ray kind of material is needed as we attempt to really understand our place and our function. The above enumeration might therefore be arranged in the following order. The table gives man as he is intended to be, and not as he is now in the course of evolutionary progress. So indeed, we realized, didn't we, as we were going through it, that there was a kind of arrangement of factors which was not exactly sequential. And sometimes the high seemed lower than the low, and so forth. But now he's going to correct that in our minds, and we will be able to understand the sequence, which will certainly help. And we, really, even if we're not surgeons or somehow physicians who deal as specialists with these factors, we have to understand their particular, or at least their general function within our system, and get our system properly trained, properly refined, properly correlated, properly made into a wholeness. And most of us are quite disintegrated when it comes to that at the present time. Now, I see that I'm closing in on the 1 hour mark. I wish I could make it exact, but, things come up and I can't. And my equipment sometimes plays tricks on me, and I think I'm also working during a Mercury retrograde period here. So, okay, I've begun to copy the previous designation, and so we'll be taking this up with the next discussion. All right, so let's do it this way. This is the end of a treatise on white magic, commentary number 19, Rules for White Magic, and this is 10.3, the third program, and we have gotten as far as, where are we? We've gotten as far as what, 285, just 4 pages done, really, 281 to 285, and this is the 11th of August. Been a little under the weather here, but hopefully it's all clearing up now. And we'll be starting with, it just wants me to copy that, and my hope is that I can. Rule 20, rules for magic, and this will be 10.4, and this will be page 285. So we'll get together on these matters shortly and try to use our fifth ray, whatever we have of it, to pinpoint the particular factors with which we are dealing, their structure, their function, their relations with other such factors, and their general place within the whole. Okay, friends, onward we move. I feel such a compulsion to continue with this, no matter what our friend Saturn throws in my direction. And I'd like, if I could, to be able to, make commentaries on many of the books of the Tibetan. Of course, he said it 100 times better, but there may be ways in which I can help us correlate what he said with other things he has said, and thereby, through that correlation, new light may flash forth. See you later now.